Well, this is Up. I'm David Gura. The senator hoping to win the White House with her Midwestern niceness is now facing new allegations of mistreating her congressional staff. The New York Times reporting Amy Klobuchar berated a staff member at an airport back in 2008 for failing to bring her a fork with her salad. So Senator Klobuchar ate the salad using a comb from her bag, then handed the comb to her aide and told him to clean it. Story details other instances, like when, parched one day in the Capitol, she turned to a member of her team and said, "I would trade 3 of you for a bottle of water." Klobuchar has addressed allegations of staff mistreatment before.
I know I can be too tough sometimes, and I can push too hard. That's obvious. But a lot of it is because I have high expectations for myself. I have high expectations for the people that work with me.
Her defenders say a male candidate would not be criticized for being as demanding of his staff. Eddie, Adrian, Mimi, and Tim are with me. Adrian, I'm going to turn to you first. First, I brought a comb.
Yeah.
Easier to cut a donut maybe with the comb.
Next to your, yeah,
cut the donut with it. I mean, there's the whole notion of just picturing someone eating a salad with a comb, which is, I think, what's going to make this stick and perhaps be somewhat problematic. But your reaction to this, and I'm interested in that theme.
Yeah.
You know, these articles came out a few weeks back alleging that she was tough on staff. The story hasn't really gone away. We heard her responding to it. But your reaction to it, how much of it is because Senator Klobuchar is a woman in the U.S. Congress?
I think it has a lot to do with that. I mean, first of all, I thought this New York Times story was really unfair because nobody went on the record. And
no staffers.
Staffers, correct. No staffer went on the record. So, you know, we don't know if we're talking about 2 disgruntled staffers who had some issues in the office and are the ones who are the sources for all of these, or these 2 stories that have come out. I think it was the Huffington Post and New York Times.
Right.
We don't know that. Secondly, I think given that the New York Times wrote this piece last night, I want to see the story written about every single presidential candidate who's running. I can guarantee you, as somebody who's worked in Washington for 20 plus years, I've worked for some pretty tough bosses.
Tell. You can't raise that.
I have seen some, you know, some of my bosses not in the most positive light, but especially when it comes to women, there's so much pressure to be perfect, to exceed expectations. I'm sure there are moments, as Senator Klobuchar has stated, that she is not proud of, but she does have high expectations of her staff. And I just think we got to get off this focus constantly on the way that she's treated her staff, because if we're going to do that, then we have to level the playing field for everybody else, and every other presidential candidate deserves the same scrutiny.
I mean, Brooke, I'll turn to you. I mean, Tim, just a moment ago, talking about the importance of elections and issues in elections, and here we are, yes, less than a year out from the Iowa caucuses, but what do you make about the degree to which this is a point of focus at this point?
I think it shouldn't be. I mean, period. You know, and Amy Klobuchar, first of all, that article, it also did quote people who said very favorable things about her, but that's not the headline. That's not the thing people are going to talk about. She gets invited to staff people's wedding. You don't invite someone to your wedding who you know, are terrified of. I think that the perspective of people who work for someone is very subjective. It can have a lot to do with their personality. You know, they can see their boss as kind or not kind depending on how they receive information. So I think that's a very select group of people. I care about how Amy Klobuchar's character. I care about every presidential candidate's character. I don't think these stories answer that question. So let's talk about their character. Let's talk about Donald Trump's character, because he is going to be a candidate and his character is horrific. And we should be talking about that, and we should be talking about the people he surrounds himself who have been accused of sexual abuse and sexual misconduct, and the allegations against him about that. Those are serious questions. The fact that she used a comb to eat a salad, I think, shows that she has problem-solving skills.
There you go. I want to turn out to Vaughn Hilliard, man without a country. He's on the road all the time. He's a man with the country. He's talking to folks across the U.S. all the time. He's in Iowa for us today, in Des Moines, Iowa. You've spent some time with Senator Klobuchar and the other candidates as well as they've made their way along the campaign trail. Just give us your sense on the ground there of how she's been dealing with this. As I say, yes, this is a story in the New York Times that broke overnight, but this is a story that was percolating over these last few weeks, Vaughn.
Yeah, good morning, David. And if I could real fast, to the defense of the reporters there, Sydney Ember and Matt Flagenheimer from the New York Times, they had quite an accounting. They talked to 24 either current or former officials inside of Klobuchar's office. And this was not new for anybody that lives in Washington, these types of stories. But as you just said, what about here in Des Moines? What about here in Iowa? And I got to tell you, there's not a single individual on the ground. I've been here for 4 weeks since these stories started coming out. There's not a single individual here in Iowa that has told me that those stories have moved them away from Amy Klobuchar. If anything, they said the word grit, which is essentially the headline that she starts off each of her stump speeches with. She says, listen, I'm the senator next door from Minnesota. She goes, I don't have a political machine. I don't have the big money, but what I do have is grit. And what these stories do, they play right into that. She says, my father was a miner, a logger. My mother was a teacher. She comes in here and she says that I'm a woman from the Midwest who is going to work hard. And I got to be frank, there's one of those stories accounted when a staffer, there was a binder that Amy Klobuchar reportedly threw and hit a staffer. And I asked one woman about it. She goes, my first thought was when I heard about a binder, it was about throwing a binder full of women. That's sort of the sentiment that you hear on the ground. And I've got to tell you, out of all the candidates, I mean, I go from each of these events and I say, what do you think about Elizabeth Warren? And I often get a response of, not so sure. What about Kamala Harris? Not so sure. Bernie Sanders? Joe Biden? Amy Klobuchar? I have yet to get a single individual that tells me absolutely no, I'm not so sure about Amy Klobuchar. I think she's going to be a big player here in Iowa. David?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.